I normally accidentally.
All right, so this is where we go over, I saw that at least one Quizlet's out there. Compliment Mackenzie. I'm sure you will compensate her and thank her and appreciate her efforts with the Quizlet that you hopefully are taking advantage of. Like maybe every once in a while you say, hey, Mackenzie, you want a candy bar at lunch? Or, little things like that. She's not asking, I don't think she would even want me to say that, but, things to show your gratitude. Anybody else make one? Casey made one, same thing. So take advantage of all of those. They won't be exactly the same, and my test won't be exactly the same as theirs. So you got the crossword puzzle, you got 2 Quizlets, you got your notes, you got your way of doing things. Put all those things together, and you should be successful. I don't know where my answer key went, but let's see if I know the answers. Ready? Now, remember how this works. I call on you if you can't just give me the answer, David. You got to tell me, like, what's that got to do with the progressive error? Ready? So let's start with David. Number 2 down, or 2 across. Taxes on imports. David, what do we call those? Tariffs. What do tariffs have to do with the progressive error?
They tax imports.
Okay, nice try, David. Were they kind of a big deal this whole time? Didn't it come up a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why? What's the point to taxing imports?
Economy.
Okay, yes. What about economy? Whose economy is it intended to help?
Ours.
The United States economy. How do tariffs help our economy?
Because people buy more from our stuff.
Because they theoretically, the things made in America would be cheaper, theoretically, not always, right? But theoretically, if a similar product's being made overseas as to here, and they're going to put an extra tax on what's coming in to the country, and you go to the store and you're like, well, there's this brand and there's that brand, and this one's $1.29, that one's $1.09, and they're the same. Why wouldn't I spend $1.09, right? Kind of the idea. Barbie, number 3 across. Exposers of corruption. Muckrakers. I'm sorry. That was good though. You both said it at the same time instead of muckrakers. Scott, where did they get the term muckrakers? I think actually Teddy's the one that came up with that term. By the way, is it okay if I call him Teddy? If I say Teddy, Dina, do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Yeah, TR, right?
No, I don't.
Teddy Roosevelt? What's his first name for real, Dina?
Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah, I mean, obviously. What was the question? Where did he get that term?
They did the deep journalism. They looked around.
Okay, muckrakers is a term for the journalists that were like looking for corruption, right? Mucking up the wakes. But where did they get the term muckraker? Help a brother out. Help a brother out. Oh, I thought you were looking at him like you were so disappointed. Jake, where'd they get that term muckraker? Really? Help us out. Where'd they get the term muckrakers?
Because they were like.
We know what they were. They were raking. They were.
Oh, like digging up the dirt.
Where'd they get the term for those types of people? Those journalists that were looking there and getting into the dirty aspects, corruption and politics and business. I thought I talked about this a lot. Jaden, from the character in Pilgrim's Progress. Better tea. I asked unto you, what is the 1890? Johns Hopkins City was Johns Hopkins Medical University established in. It's a tough one. Anybody know? Baltimore, Maryland. You knew that? Nice. Okay, so the significance is, this is like the first, you can imagine in the old days, Little House on the Prairie, right? you had your traveling doctors, right? And they, by the way, back then, being a doctor, being someone that offered medical service wasn't something you did. It was kind of like being a preacher, not something you did where you expected to become rich. You know, it is the last few generations in America, like, hey, you know, you go to school for a long time and you go to be a doctor because part of the motivation is you can make pretty good money, right? Now your heart is to help people, I hope, but hopefully no one's going in to be a doctor just for the money. That would be scary. That might be something you want to research about your doctor later. Did they go into medicine to help people or because it was going to pay a lot? Right? When you want someone that went into medicine because they wanted to serve people and make sure that they were doing everything they can to keep them healthy, rather than, hey, I went to school to be a doctor because I heard like a surgeon makes $1.2 million a year, and that's why I did it. I mean, they can still be good at it because money is a great motivator. But anyway, is it on you now, Jaden, for real? You next? Have you noticed the pattern? Next one, Jaden. The blank Peace Prize. The Nobel Peace Prize. And who won it? In our study of this chapter, who won the Nobel Peace Prize? Someone very famous won the Nobel Peace Prize. Very famous. Teddy Roosevelt. Why did he win the Nobel Peace Prize? This is a prize given to people each year. And if it's the Peace Prize, it's something they've done probably internationally to promote the cause of peace in the world. Go ahead. No? Verity. Russia. There was a conflict, warlike activity between Japan and Russia, and they called Teddy in, and Teddy tried to get the people together and averted that getting bigger. Number 10, Serenity. 16 battleships. This is the one where I put on the board, you should have written next to it 3 words. Go ahead.
Great White Fleet.
Yeah, what was the point to that? What is the point to having this great white fleet of 16 battleships?
I don't know.
Anybody? Yeah.
They parked them outside Japan to scare everybody.
So Roosevelt wanted to display American
Dominance.
power, strength, right? And putting all the world, now he sent them over towards Japan to go into the east to show, like, you know, America is rising, we're becoming more powerful, you know, our allies, Europe kind of knew it, but let's go all the way to the east. Let's take our ships all the way over towards Japan and China. Let all the world know America has arrived. The Great White Fleet. Jake.
11 across.
Oh, secret ballot.
Isn't that funny how it came that you're the one that said that yesterday and that was your question today?
What?
When someone was doing the crossword puzzle and they go, secret, and you go,
Uh,
ballot, it's obvious. Some people didn't know. So what's the significance of the secret ballot?
so now everyone could know.
When was this? Give me a time period. You don't have to have the exact year, but
Oh,
Like-
it's in the progressive era.
yeah, when is that?
This is like late 1800s.
Absolutely, yeah, 1890s.
Yeah.
Good job. And before that, then, what do you mean? You mean they didn't have secret ballots?
Yeah.
They did not?
And then,
Wow. 7, socialist leader, who fits there?
Then,
Debs. Just by chance, do you happen to remember his first name and middle initial?
Eugene V. Debs.
Eugene V. Debs. And how did he become such a popular figure? Starts with U, unions. Jamin, Weeby, Sinclair novel.
The Jungle.
The Jungle. What term might we apply to Upton Sinclair? What nickname might we give him as a writer of the novel The Jungle? We've already talked about this nickname, this word, this title people were given as writers, or they could be authors of books or writers in newspapers. and they were trying to expose all of the bad things that were going on. Like, he would go into these meat packing places and be like, "You kidding me? This dirty, filthy, unsafe, unclean place is where they are processing the meat that's going to go on people's tables." What are they called?
Muck
Rape, yeah, muck rape.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Oh, Caleb, 1902 strike.
Coal miners.
Right. Who got involved in that? Who basically made sure those coal miners got back to work?
President.
President who?
Theodore Roosevelt.
Theodore Roosevelt. All right, so why was the president, listen, do you think the president got involved in every conflict between the union and the companies, Caleb? Do you think the president would always get involved in every single conflict? Why did he get involved in this conflict?
Completely shut down. He was like,
Well, what would that, if the coal mines all completely shut down because the workers were out on strike, what would that mean for all the country?
we can't have coal.
And what does coal provide?
Heat.
Okay,
And
electricity, very good, yes. You did good. Emily, blank parts, interchangeable parts. Was that a spelling lesson also? Like, does the E stay there with changeable? Isn't that always tricky? So like, wait, am I spelling this right? Interchangeable parts, Emily, what does that have to do with this chapter?
Well, I think Henry Ford used it so they could make more cars.
Right, so, and people would have these interchangeable parts on, what do we call that mode of production,
Mass.
right? There's mass production, but by what mode, by what means, what did they use? It kind of moves along.
No.
Hmm.
You got it?
Assembly line, yeah. And that's what helped make his cars affordable. 18th Amendment, McKenna,
Prohibition.
prohibition of what?
Alcohol.
Alcohol.
Hmm.
So people weren't allowed to drink, it was against the law to drink alcohol? Tricky question.
Well,
Was it against the law to drink alcohol?
They made it so you couldn't buy it.
You couldn't sell it, transport it, manufacture it. But there was actually no law against drinking it, isn't that strange? Mackenzie,
I manufactured.
Yeah.
So if you just found it, you could drink it legally.
well, the point of the law again was, we can't tell people what they can't, now I made it think it was kind of ironic, that we can't tell people in America what you can or cannot put into your body. But we can stop the scourge of alcoholism and all of the strife that comes with it and abuse and destruction of the family. We can stop that by prohibiting the sale, manufacture, and transport. Is it on you, Mackenzie? Okay, Mackenzie, Dubai Association.
But NAACP.
The N, you'll sound like you know more what you're talking about if you say the NAACP, okay? It's just, that's whatever, when somebody refers to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, it's NAACP, so it started about 112 years ago, and its cause was to make sure in the legal system there was a group that was going to have lawyers available to help Black people in their battle for equal rights. Make sense? Elise, 5 blank parks.
National.
What's one way we can describe Teddy Roosevelt? Starts with a C. This was one of his passions that led him to establish 5 national parks. He was known as a blank. Starts with a C. Loves the outdoors. Likes to preserve over 100 million acres. Made 5 national parks. He's known as a McKenna.
Conservation.
Conservationist. Derek, Wilson's University.
Princeton,
He was president of Princeton before he became president of the United States. You know any other job he might have had? He had another very important job. I guess some would argue it was more important than President of Princeton, and you could argue it was less important than President of Princeton, depending on your perspective. Yeah. No. He was Wilson's other title, other than President of Princeton. He was governor of New Jersey. Next, Teddy's new party,
Bull Moose.
the Bull Moose. How'd that come about?
Because
Why was Teddy?
was the incumbent Republican.
Nice use of vocab right there. Anybody got a little? We should have a little bell. Ding. I'm gonna get. Who's gonna have one here? I
Expert.
thought I remember seeing a little bell somewhere.
You can just use the expert thing.
Expert bell.
Just have it set up at all times.
Yeah, ding. Nice use of vocab. He was the incumbent president. So then,
Well, Ian, what's his name? The main guy. Roosevelt didn't think he was doing a good job anymore. He came back, but he couldn't be a Republican, so he had to make his own party.
what else was significant about Roosevelt even running again?
Because it was his third term, and nobody had ever done that before.
It would have been his third term. That would have been like outside the American, like, hey, whoa. George Washington said 2 terms is enough and walked away. Who would you think you were that you're gonna try to be president? George Washington. Bella D. Slave to Tuskegee. I mean, this is it. You said Washington Carver, so you got the answer right on your crossword because you put Washington, right? But which Washington?
Washington.
Booker T.
Booker T. Booker T. Washington's the one that started Tuskegee. Let's just see though. Let's see if you can remember. Ready? Voters vote directly for, or like they vote directly for or Sid? A referendum. So instead of the legislature coming up with a bill and then they all vote on it, yay or nay, and it becomes a law or not, this is something that the voters directly vote on. That's an example of Cleveland and how those stadiums were built. That was a referendum. It was put on the ballot and the people voted. Hey, you guys want a new baseball stadium, a new basketball arena? Well, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to tax all those bad behaviors like drinking and smoking, uses of tobacco. We'll put an extra tax on that. And of course, people are like, oh, okay. That means if I don't smoke or drink, I don't have to pay for it at all. We'll get this nice updated stadiums. Great. What do they call it? The syntax. True Bear. An acronym for Supreme Court. SCOTUS. Very good. What's the acronym for the presidency? Nice. Acronym for the wife of the president. Like he knew that was coming. What are we going to do when we have our first woman president? What are we going to call the husband?
Modus.
Huh?
Male.
Modus.
Man.
Man of Modus.
Wait, first man.
First man, doesn't, there's no flow to that.
Modus.
Dina, populist turned progressive, 3 words. Very good. He was very popular, Dina. Dina, William Jennings Bryan is probably the most popular politician who strived to a certain position, but never became. What position was he striving for? What's the president, right? He's probably the most popular candidate ever that never became president. He was that popular. Annie, Roosevelt's deal. What does that mean? Why did he call it a square deal?
Those, like, treating everyone fair.
Yeah, like, hey, give everybody a square deal, will you? Give everybody a fair deal. Hey, be square with me. In other words, don't lie to me. Be honest with me. Be fair with me. Does that make sense? And then when I was growing up, if you were square, you were like a nerd. Well, that was actually a little before my time. That was like 50s and 60s. They called you square, you were a nerd. Mine was more nerd. Why are we looking around? We don't have any nerds in here. Yeah. We do.
Caleb Boardman. There's the restroom.
TJ. Ferguson's foe? Plessy. Plessy versus Ferguson. What's the significance? I don't think I made quite a big enough deal about this. I think I told you it was a very, very important Supreme Court decision. And I think we talked about in 1896 that they said that it was okay to have separate places for blacks and whites, right? Well, that leads to a phrase that becomes very prominent, and it leads to this kind of thinking prevailing all the way up to the 1950s and 1960s. It's called separate but equal. Jake, when people use this separate but equal, now remember this, when you go to college and they say, Plessy, because I told you you're going to hear this over and over, right? This is a very big court case. The court decided that in this railroad company, it was okay to have some sections for whites and some sections for blacks. When the court said that that was okay to do, any business that had racist tendencies or intentions then used that decision to say, hey, it's the law of the land. I can make separate fountains. I can make separate restrooms. We are going to be able to segregate or separate people based on race, and we'll just say separate but equal. Hey, blacks have a water fountain. We're treating them equally. Blacks have schools. We're treating them equally. Blacks have a place on the bus. In fact, hey, they're allowed to ride the bus. See? They use that case, Plessy versus Ferguson, to that was like a big hammer over civil rights for 60 years. Ben, Roosevelt's addition to Monroe.
Corollary.
It was a corollary to what? What about Monroe? Like the Monroe Doctrine, 1820. What did Monroe say in 1820 to all the world?
That America was basically going to be in charge of the Western Hemisphere.
Yep. Hey, all you European powers, we got the Western Hemisphere. You take care of what's going on over there in Europe, and we'll take care of what's going on in our neighborhood. And Roosevelt came along 80 years later and said, 80 plus years later, and said, not only that, this is kind of a message to all of the Americas then. We'll take care of all the situations. We're the policemen. That's the key word there. The Roosevelt Court says not only to Europe that we'll take care of things over here, it says to all of America that we're kind of the policemen of your affairs. We're kind of in charge. We'll take care of it. Riley, break them up. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one. Blank fever. What about yellow fever? What did we find out about yellow fever?
I don't remember.
What did we find out about yellow fever? Yeah, that it came from mosquitoes in 1900. This is a big development. Like, we're trying to combat this deadly disease, yellow fever, and we can't figure out how to stop it. We can't figure out, Derek, where it even came from. One way to stop it would be to find out the origin of it, right? So we can stop where it's coming from, and then we can learn how to treat the people. And we found out it came from mosquitoes, and that's going to lead to more developments and the origin of other diseases. Jonathan, break them up. Did you get that one?
No.
What did I mean by break them up? Anybody? Yeah. Trusts. We talked a lot in the progressive era about breaking up trusts. We cannot have these super huge companies, super corporations, gobbling up all the other small businesses and monopolizing, right? America's built on, what is so funny? America's built on free market competition. And when you have all these trusts and all these different industries, they're gobbling up the competition. The opposite of competition is monopoly. When you play monopoly, your goal is to defeat all your competition and monopolize everything, right? That's the whole point of it. Well, that's not, in the American way, good for all the general welfare. What's good for the general welfare of the people is competition. Competition leads to Jaden and Serenity producing things that are going to help us, producing them at a competing cost. If Jaden and Serenity produce something that we all really like, and one of them charges way more than the other, we're buying the other. So that's good for everyone, right? And if Serenity, hers costs more, but then we find out hers isn't as good as Jaden's, we're going to start buying Jaden's. That's good for everybody, right? But if you have a monopoly, who's making them accountable? Especially if it's something you don't just want, but you need. So then we got into Americans kind of like bought into this idea that, you know what? A monopoly is okay if it means like there's one entity we can count on and the government's overseeing it to make sure everybody has electric, right? Imagine if the power went out and Mrs. Tosh lives in Salem, I live in Salem. Who else lives in Salem? Jonathan, you live in Salem?
Yeah.
Jonathan, TJ lives in Salem.
Yeah.
What if, and there was like 6 companies we all had to call to try to get the power back on. Would that be good? Right? There's like one entity that we go to and say, okay, hey, we know who's responsible for getting the power back on. So we accept them in that case. The first flight, raise your hand, let's get this done. First flight. Yep. Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Susan B. Anthony, what was her contribution to all this?
She was with like the women's suffrage.
She was for a long time fighting for women's suffrage. What did we say was kind of not ironic, I guess, but maybe, is that the right use of the word ironic? Susan B. Anthony and others were working so hard for women's suffrage, but they also started before the Civil War working for women's suffrage, and they also worked for black man's suffrage, right? When it came to allow the black men to vote, they didn't get included for 50 more years. By the way, okay, let's clear this up. If you noticed when you came in, that's what the problem was with number 21. Somehow, I don't know. Because obviously in my mind, I thought I wrote for the blue tax government. So now you know the answer. Or some of you figured it out anyway. Maybe you saw I, P, and Dina. Philippines. The idea there was President Taft rising up through the ranks of politics and becoming like Teddy's right-hand man. Teddy sent him to govern the Philippines after what war was that? What was that war in 1898? That kind of led to the further growth of America, especially internationally. We picked up control of the Philippines, the island called Guam, Puerto Rico. The Spaniards were out of Cuba. Yeah, Spanish-American War. 16th Amendment, 2 words. Everybody knows. Emily. Income tax, federal income tax. David, if I made $3,000 per year in 1913, how much of my income would I have to give to the federal government? What percent? 1. Do you know what they're talking about now? Like right now, this morning on the news. That for the highest incomes, because we have what's called a progressive income tax, right? Graduate? For the highest incomes, this is the number that I heard. 57%. Now, put it this way. You go to work every day. You're working for your family, right? If 57% of your money goes to your family, that's a great thing. Probably more than that, right? Imagine going to work every day knowing that 50% of your money is going to the federal government. Are you with me on how outlandish that is? We just throw numbers around. Well, they're rich. They can handle it. You go to work every day and you know that 50's over half your money isn't for you, isn't for your family, isn't for your church. It's to the federal government. And there's people that want that. There's people that think that's quote unquote fair. Is anybody against me here? Is everybody with me? Does anybody think I'm crazy for saying that that's outlandish? Over half your money? So let's say you go work 10 hours in a day. Well, once you get past lunch, then you start making for you and your family. Because all those hours you worked up until 1 o'clock, that all went to the federal government. Am I the only one that thinks that's crazy? Nobody ever talks about it like that, right? They always say, oh, tax rate 28% or 36% or you're taking half people's money. And when I say take, isn't that what it is? Do they have a choice? Somebody have their hand up over here?
Yeah. Couldn't they just basically achieve socialism by steepening the graduated income?
Of course. And what happens if you keep doing that and then you run out of other people's money? Then how are you gonna distribute the resources to the poor? What happens when you run out of money? There's a great book. If I showed you the book, you'd faint if I suggested that you read it. It's on the bottom shelf back there all the way. It's called Atlas Shrugged. And it's all about this very thing, that one day, all the industrialists that we are attacking their incomes all decide to leave and go to Mexico and other places. And now America's left with no rich people to pay the taxes. Then what? Last thing, or two more things. Billy Sunday. Seth. Billy Sunday. Don't forget that. Professional baseball player that made it, just like many kids probably dreamed, and then said, the Lord's calling me to evangelize. I don't have time for baseball. And lastly, laws favoring segregation, 2 words, a series of laws passed in many of the southern states to get around all the other laws and the amendments. Oh, we're not keeping black people from voting. They just got to pay a little extra. They just got to pass a literacy test. We're not letting them vote because they're black. We're not letting them vote because they can't read. We're not letting them vote because they can't pay. Yeah, Verity. Jim Crow laws. And if you remember, Jim Crow was another term for a character. This time it was in a minstrel show. Look, don't be lazy. 2 of your classmates have gone through the trouble of putting a Quizlet out there, and then you're not even going to take advantage of it. You know what the easiest thing to do for a teacher? This is why all your teachers actually want you all to get A's. I sit down to grade the paper, and I go like this, because then after a few, you memorize the word of the answers, right? And you go like this. And you can grade a paper in like 30 seconds, because all the answers are the same. And it's not because James is looking at Verity's. If they're all the same, because Jade would never do that. Because she knows wandering eyes
Make me
wander. Any other questions? This is fun, Elise.
It's great Quizlets.
great money.
Elise. Hey, what you got something on the where you at? You got the whole memorized?
We're gonna study history. We might be getting the second.
If we have time, we can like read it.
They came out with a.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's like a part. Sweet.
Hello, Meredith.
No alcohol for once.
Oh
Yay.
my goodness. Oh, because you didn't have
Yeah,
class.
I didn't have class. Is it? Because I pulled that one. No, I'm only wearing one t-shirt.
I know, but was it like?
Yeah, JJ's there.
Right, it's not the same
No, it's not.
I never see that picture.
I literally didn't know what to do at all. Like, I was so confused.
That's why you did, stay during the street.
That's just left it out. Left it in
We went from $1 to 99 cents.
Huh? Remember that phrase?
Yeah.
Oh, I said that to my mom and she was sad in your cup. I said, always excuses with no explanations. In my face, you made you talking.
One of these days, these boots are.
Don't trip anymore. Oh, hold
That's your head.
the dude that lives there for like 5 years or whatever.
on.
That is really, really strong. He like paid like $10 to claim the mortgage or whatever.
Yeah.
So he just gave it to them and made them pay the fee after. That's not like
Crazy, isn't it?
it is. That he's the first like president.
So he's not the first public.
Yeah, probably yeah. He'd be a Democrat on behalf of.
Dude,